healthy. And coronavirus is a strange time for all of us, and being surrounded by virus of the future, it still comes upon us to at least make an effort to understand what's going on and start designing the new normal for the post-coronavirus world. So this video is just a little effort to simplify the effects of the coronavirus on the world and on our country, India. As we know that the United Nations has made an estimation of a downfall of 1% in the world GDP in the upcoming financial year, which sounds like a small number, but as compared to the previous pattern of the estimation of a positive rise of 2%, a negative of 1% creates a lot of development and money growth gap for countries across the world. Which also comes with severe impacts because of the globalization, which has made most of the countries interdependent on each other for its financial growth, right? And as the two major players in the foreign trade scenario, which are the US and the China, are also the two worst hit countries by this pandemic, certainly the foreign trade power dynamics are changing and are going to change throughout the course of the few years. The best example of it is our very own country, India, which is one of the first and the most strict countries to introduce stern foreign direct investment measures against China and also against its bordering nations as an effort to protect its domestic industries from getting weakened and swallowed by foreign direct investors. Now, that is going to turn out domestically well and probably also going to put a lot of burden on our domestic industries. This turns out in two ways for India. First, in terms of export. Most of the industries in India are dependent on their raw material from China, which means when there is a less influx of input in the industries, that certainly directly impacts the productivity and efficiency of these industries. And when the efficiency and the productivity is low, that creates a ripple effect of less outcomes and therefore layoffs in profits and jobs and services provided in the country. But on the side of the exports, good news for India, because India is one of the very few countries which have a low dependence on the exports for its national income, which means that even in the worst case scenario, where most of the export dependent nations will face a deficit in their national income, India is going to be one of the countries which will have a comparatively stable income because of its better national production of goods and services and other methods of income. Other than that, all of this for us on the ground level pans out in the sense that there is going to be a large break and change in the demand change across the world, because when more people run out of business or have less income, they go out and demand for less services. And when there is less services, which leads to less economic activity, which in turn leads to more people pushed out of business. Now that sounds like a scared scenario, and it probably is, but what happens in these times is that most important for all of the businesses is only to survive and not think about the profits. Now that we've talked about how foreign trade impacts the countries and us on the ground level, let's think about what are the factors that uniquely impact India. India is right now, like other countries, struggling to create investments and bring on resources for its healthcare system. Now this works out well for countries who had already been paying attention for their better healthcare systems. But as in a country like India, where 80% of our hospitals are privatized, and now it comes on the government to take on the responsibility of treatment of thousands and millions and probably millions of people in the future, most of the money of the country's reserves is being diverted to the healthcare system, which means that there is going to be a less amount of investment in other areas of development, such as upliftment of farmers, the education sector, or the industrial sector, and every other aspect of the economy in general, which is going to lead to a shift of turmoil in the economic scenario in the country. Other than that we know that we also have a large population which is dependent on the informal sector for work. These are the kind of people which have the least amount of job security, the least amount of savings, and are worst hit by this pandemic, and are sadly also the most in number. people such as vegetable vendors or industrial laborers or seasonal workers who are being the victims of the most uncertain scenario right now, which it comes as a major drawback for a country like India, because it becomes difficult to recover or survive here in times of unemployment because of the lack of social security system which is available in countries like the US or Germany. Also, other than that, it also comes off as a shock to countries and states who are highly dependent on the tourism sector, because it is one of the things that will take years and years to recover and probably perfectly start functioning because of the virus. States such as Rajasthan, smaller states such as Goa, countries like Bali or Bhutan, whose major income is dependent on tourism, are going to have a hard time looking for alternate sources of income and economic development and just keep on par with their other peers. And so there are a lot of things that are happening right now, but no amount of numbers and no amount of statistics can ever capture the turmoil that's underneath. So after the 6 minutes of talking economics, let's just take a minute to think about and appreciate what we have right now, because this is a scenario which has never come before and will hopefully never come afterwards. We as a world are together in this and are going to come out of this successfully. So let's just take a moment to appreciate the privilege that we have a roof on our head, we have good food to eat, we are getting to spend time with the people that we love, and are getting an opportunity to work on ourselves, getting opportunities such as this debate to put forth our views and educate ourselves constantly and come out of this pandemic as better, more sensitive and hopefully healthier people. And just a great thank you for viewing this video, and looking forward to many more discussions with everyone.
Today, I'm Manvi Jain of Scholars to Edge, and I'll be talking about COVID-19's impact on Indian and global economy. It might seem like a distant past, but just about 6 to 8 weeks ago, people in India were talking about something else, not coronavirus. The spiral of economic slowdown, the resultant unemployment, CA, NRC, and Delhi riots dominated the public debates. Where in the world, the US-China trade war and Brexit were popular public debates. And suddenly, a little virus from one of the business hubs in China, that is Wuhan, changed the entire global discourse. Coronavirus jumped from scientists' lexicon to a common woman's dictionary. The novel coronavirus pandemic, apart from being the gravest health crisis ever faced by humanity, also poses a serious threat to the global economy. Partial or complete lockdown in several countries has seen demand in almost all sectors except pharmaceuticals take a nosedive. Airlines are grounded, markets are shut, and governments are weighing options on how to infuse money into their countries in order to, number one, contain the pandemic, and number two, revive their economies. The world is currently facing the biggest economic crisis ever after the Great Depression of 1930s. The International Monetary Fund is one of the top global bodies that has expressed its concern over this economic slowdown, and it has also suggested that the global GDP might sink by 3% in 2020 and 21. However, this seems to many great economists as a very optimistic estimation. The damage, according to them, will be much greater than 3%. In case of India, there are a large number of problems for a country like India, where a large part of population has lost its job in the wake of the COVID-19 lockdown. The decision to lock down the key economic activities during this pandemic seems fair given the current situation, but India's economy might take a massive hit as public debt will rise exponentially and the country's fiscal deficit level could also be stretched to the limit. Also, the composition of growth in India across various sectors might change significantly if the containment of the global pandemic does not occur on the expected lines. However, I feel that the Indian government should strongly focus on saving the livelihoods of the people and the companies in order to effectively restart the economy once the situation improves. Globally, what we can now see is a trilateral series of shocks arising from the COVID-19 pandemic. A first is an initial supply side shock from China's shutdown. Second is a fiscal shock for countries where there is a declared public health emergency. And third is an oil price shock with crude oil's prices being cut to encourage consumption. It is very clear that the global economy will not go back to normal until and unless the virus is contained. The best we can hope is for a weak recovery. And if we open the lockdowns too soon, we'll have a W curve recovery. A W curve recovery could be a possibility if the virus re-emerges when the companies across the globe start with their operations, which will then further lead to more spread of the virus, and the entire world will have to go through another period of economic depression before the final recovery. Having said that, it is clear that the global pandemic has introduced new challenges to almost all spheres of life, particularly the business environment, which I feel calls for a measured, practical, and informed approach from both the business leaders and the governments. In the end, I'd like to say that it's just a break and not the end. And we all need to remember that our lives are more important and we're more than our economies. Thank you.
I'm Salakurashi of Scholars to Edge, and I would like to draw your attention on the ongoing condition of an economy due to corona pandemic. The outbreak was identified in Wuhan, China in December 2019. The pandemic leads to global socio-economic disruption, the postponement or cancellation of sporting, religious, cultural events, etc. And schools, colleges and universities have closed due to all over the worldwide, affecting approximately 98.5% of world student population. Coronavirus recession, also known as Great Lockdown or Great Shutdown, and has led to more than a third of the world population being placed on lockdown to stop spread COVID-19. Yet now, no vaccine is discovered, hence lockdown and social distancing is the best solution to fight against it. The outcome of this leads to sharp rise in unemployment, 2020 stock market crash, collapse in tourism industry, collapse in oil prices, etc. The IMF has stated that the economic decline is far worse than the Great Recession in 2008 and 2009. Worldwide, approximately 34 lakh 43,750 are infected, 2 lakh 42,263 are died, and 11 lakh 2,124 are recovered. Country like US, which is the most powerful and first economy in the world, also leads to too much downfall in economy. 16 million jobs were lost in US alone on 3 weeks ending on 4 April. A new record of unemployment claims was made. The US Department of Commerce reported that consumer spending fell by 7.5% during the month of March 2020. The GDP declines at the rate of 4.8% during the first quarter of 2020. As a result of recession, China's economy contracted for the first time in almost 50 years. Italy unemployment rate is expected to rise 11.2%, with 51% fearing unemployment in March. After seeing the conditions of other countries, our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi ji, has announced the lockdown before the condition get worsened, because it is the best solution to combat with it. No doubt it affects Indian economy as well. IMF projected a GDP growth of 1.9% of the India in 2020 because of the economy get affected. From the economy's point of view, the lockdown undoubtedly look costly right now, but as compared to the lives of Indian citizens, it is nothing. Our Indian government have made all its possible efforts to get through this faster, and also appreciated by many other countries of the world and WHO. Our healthcare workers, police department, etc. has made best possible efforts to combat with this. So do cooperate with them, follow all the guidelines given by the government, stay at home, stay safe, and thank you.
It's a recession when your neighbor loses his job. It's a depression when you lose yours. This quote by Harry Truman is coming true, as lakhs of people worldwide can become unemployed due to the coronavirus. Aishwarya Singh of Subodh Public School is in front of you to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on global and Indian economy. This is a time when billions of people worldwide are confined to their homes and are consuming their necessities. And due to this inactive stage of human resource, the global economy has shrunk by 1% according to the data of United Nations till now, when we don't know what happens next. Millions of workers in hundreds of countries are facing the bleak prospect of losing their jobs till now, when we don't know what happens next. The governments of these countries are just rolling out packages to avert a downturn of their economies, which is plunging the global economy into a deep recession. Talking about recession, when we come to our own nation, India, which is still regretting the careless attitude of some people, our country was already suffering from a slowed economy, and I'm tense that the government recently borrowed 1.76 lakh crore rupees from the RBI last year. Unsurprisingly, the Asian Development Bank estimated Indian economic growth to slow down to 4% in fiscal year 2021 till now, when we don't know what happens next. The impact of this undying virus is so catastrophic that I'm forced to believe that the 5 trillion economy goal of our Honorable Prime Minister now seems impossible. The government too is left out of option, and the only thing that remains is to pray. The economies of the world are severely annihilated, and there is no way that any nation rebuilds its economy in less than a year. In this derelict situation, what we can do as an individual is just stay aloof and protect ourselves, as there are millions of people infected till now, when we don't know what happens next. The RBI reduced the repo rate by 75 basic points, bringing it to 4.4%, which is the lowest repo rate ever, and it is a serious issue to be considered. Not only that, the reverse repo rate is also reduced by 90 basic points. This will increase the internal borrowing by a number of times, and there will be a huge risk of rising inflation, which will make the conditions worst. The WTO economists believe that this decline will certainly exceed the global financial crisis of 2009, which is the largest global crisis ever. The world is falling into a Great Depression till now, when we don't know what happens next.